politics team. We have Hayleigh Colombo, our government accountability reporter, Kayla Dwyer, our Statehouse reporter, and Marissa Meador, our breaking political news reporter. So that's what I want to start with today, obviously, is redistricting. That's the thing probably most of our viewers want to hear what in the world is happening with that, because it was a very newsy weekend on that front. Kayla, for those of us who don't live and breathe Statehouse politics, actually, back up a little bit. So, Organization Day, you know, that is probably not a term many people are familiar with. That is the main reason lawmakers are coming in today, even though redistricting will likely come up. So, let's start there. Organization Day, Kayla, what is that?
It's like back to school, except then we stop going to school again, and then we come back in January. So Organization
It's not the
Day,
best metaphor there.
I know. I started to say, and then I regretted it. No, so basically it's just the day where, by law, they're supposed to come in on this certain day to start, to gavel in, to convene, to pass any new rules that, govern how debates go and how, logistics are run in the legislature, swear in any new members, if there are any, in a given year, and we'll hear some speeches from the leaders about what they want to do this session, and this particular org day might be interesting because with the House and the Senate in disagreement over when they want to return to, if they want to return in December to do redistricting. That's a problem because usually there's what we call a concurrent resolution on when they return, which is normally January. So that's going to have to get worked out somehow. When are they actually returning,
Yeah, I would really like to know so I can plan out my December, but hopefully we'll get some answers and clarity today on that. So redistricting, you mentioned that will be obviously the big subject today. Governor Braun had called lawmakers back to convene for a special session about a month ago or so, and there was plans for them to return in December, like you mentioned. We heard on Friday that President Pro Tem Roderick Bray said, no, we do not have the votes. We're not going to return in December to redistrict. And because of that, there's been some pressure from the White House, that sort of thing. So, Hayleigh, does this mean redistricting isn't happening since Rod Bray said this?
Nothing is dead. I think nothing is dead at the Statehouse until
the time has already passed for it to be alive.
Yeah, I feel like up until this is an exaggeration, but up until the date of the primary election, I don't know if I believe that redistricting is dead. I'm just kidding. But I do think there is going to be a drop dead date that they will have to do something by. Also, other states that have redistricted, these efforts have wound up in court in almost all of the states. So that takes a little bit of time, some time to get through. So no, I don't think it's fully dead just because the Senate president says the votes aren't there, because there's still, lawmakers are being invited to the White House, and there's just more pressure from national, Republicans, the MAGA movement, and so I don't think we can fully say this isn't happening fully, but it doesn't look great for proponents of redistricting at this juncture.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that because there's been pressure for months. J.D. Vance visited this summer, so it's...
He came twice.
Yes. I'm kind of of the mindset that if Trump hasn't won over some of these lawmakers yet, will he ever? I think that the lawmakers who are opposed are maybe pretty set in their opposition. Kayla, we've been tracking where every senator stands on this because the Senate is the holdouts, not the House. So is Bray right that the Senate doesn't have the votes? Where do we stand on that right now?
Well, there's what we know, and then there's people who haven't said anything and won't answer our phone calls. So, by our count, they would need 25 yeses in order to pass redistricting in the Senate among Republicans. We're assuming all the Democrats would vote no, of course. And we think we've counted about 13 public yeses, people who have come out and said, I'm a yes. And then, there's a handful of maybes and there's a handful of no's, and then there's a handful of So the 40 minus 13 is how many people are no, maybe, or haven't said anything. And to your point, if you haven't said anything, are you really that enthusiastic about the idea? I don't know. So I think Braun has said he thinks it would be a close vote. So that would mean that all of those people who haven't said anything would have to be convinced to say yes.
Because in the Senate, there's 50 lawmakers, so you need 25 lawmakers plus Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith, who obviously supports redistricting, to approve these maps for it to pass. So it doesn't even matter if there's a majority in the Senate Republican caucus. You need a majority in all of the Senate. So
yep. So he might be right, but we won't know until the vote would be forced.
Now, Marissa, Trump, again, like I mentioned earlier, Trump and the White House have been putting pressure on Indiana lawmakers. How did Trump respond to the news on Friday that the Senate won't be coming back in for redistricting, at least for right now?
Yeah, he certainly wasn't very happy. It could really come down to Indiana when it comes to control of the House. So he's fired off on Truth Social about it a bit, kind of accusing Indiana Senate Republicans of not being truly loyal to the party or to Trump's mission. So.
Yeah, I did I have my notes here. I didn't let them have notes, but I have notes. Just a snippet of what Trump said on Truth Social over the weekend. He said, very disappointed in Indiana State Senate Republicans led by Rhino Senators Rod Bray and Greg Good for not wanting to redistrict their state. He also went after Governor Braun, even though Braun is fully supportive of the idea of redistricting. Trump said, Governor Mike Braun perhaps is not working the way he should to get the necessary votes, considering that Mike wouldn't be governor without me. Not even close is disappointing. Kayla, can you explain why Braun, whom Trump once endorsed, is taking heat for this? And should he be troubled that he's being directly attacked by Trump, who he counts as an ally for himself?
Yeah, not only did he end up promising something to Trump that he so far hasn't delivered, but he also, kind of went back on his word to legislators too. He was originally saying I will lean on what they want to do. And then he just went ahead and called for the special session anyway, despite, getting word from the leaders that the votes wouldn't be there. So you kind of have this double on both fronts. I think there might be some personal, relationships harmed between him and the legislature for that reason. And then between him and Trump, we've seen multiple times now where using the Trump capital has backfired on Braun. The other time was during the convention when they were nominating who the lieutenant governor would be, and Braun calls in a last-minute endorsement from Trump for his person, and that didn't work. So
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. So this is almost like that 2.0. So as these strikes continue to happen, it kind of has the effect of possibly eroding the sway or power that he would seem to have in the legislature, but also with Trump.
Yeah. Okay, assume Trump does get his way and redistricting does finally happen after all this pressure. Marissa, what areas of the state can we expect to maybe see changes to how the congressional districts are drawn?
Yeah, so the top two changes that legislators will probably go for, if this is on the table still, is in Northwest Indiana, Frank Mervin's district. He's one of two Democrats that still hold seats in Indiana. That district has been trending to the right in general, and Republicans have viewed it as potential pickup. So that will definitely be an area that they'll be looking at. Also, Andre Carson's district in Indianapolis, some potential maps just kind of circulated informally have shown Indianapolis being split into thirds or maybe even fourths, just to kind of dilute that vote into different districts.
Yeah. I thought it was fascinating. One of the senators who just announced their stance, Senator Dorio, he had mentioned that he wants to work hard to flip the first Northwest district in Indiana with the current maps, and that, you know, he thinks that's a possibility. So I just thought that was a really interesting perspective, that he was still saying we can still win this even without redrawing the maps. And I think that's probably true, right? I mean, Hayleigh,
that has been so fascinating. I read that too yesterday, and it kind of like brought me back to like, wait, the whole point of this is winning elections. There's been so much focus on redrawing the maps to get some sort of electoral advantage, as opposed to just like knocking on doors, doing politics. You know what I mean? Like, especially for the first, I think Dorio makes a good point that, you know, the first is probably winnable for the GOP.
Yeah.
And, you know, if the Republicans put as much money into, you know, beating Mervan in the first as they have into redistricting and these text messages and that sort of thing, like, you know, would they be successful? And are they going to be less successful now if if they have spent all of this time and political capital on redistricting, as opposed to just like trying to win the seat?
That was the interesting flip side of Dorio's statement, which is like, do we even have viable candidates to plug in right now? If we redraw this now and it's a Republican favored seat, like that's like no time for someone to get on the ground and run a campaign for 2026.
Right. Because
Which is
the
less than a year
filing
away.
deadline, that's what, in February? Is that, I think
Yeah,
February is the
yeah.
filing deadline for candidates to announce their running. So, I mean, yes, you have to announce your intention to run and file and start raising money. And usually the most successful candidates aren't the ones who are doing that literally months before the primary election. I'm very curious. Even if redistricting does happen, this is going to be just very confusing and hard and weird for all of our congressional candidates, even incumbents who knows, are they going to remain in their same district? And if they do, it could look a lot different than it does. So
Yeah, you're knocking on all these new doors, probably.
Right. So really curious to see how these next few months play out. I do want to talk a little bit about not just redistricting, since obviously, again, we're talking about Organization Day, the ceremonial start of the 2026 legislative session, and talking about some of the big issues that might come up on Organization Day and beyond. Hayleigh, you went to the Indiana Chamber of Commerce Legislative Preview Day yesterday along with Marissa. What were some of the big topics discussed during that might come up during the 2026 legislative session?
For sure. So I think the biggest thing to expect is that there's going to be some tweaks to the property tax reform bill that Governor Braun pushed for last year. That bill has had, I don't know if I should call it unintended consequences, or maybe they're intended consequences, but regardless, consequences for local municipalities across the state. And those local leaders across the state have been increasingly vocal after Senate Bill 1, that was the property tax reform bill, was passed last year. They've been increasingly vocal that they don't like this. This could end up hurting their residents, you know, people who want their local governments to, you know, improve the parks and invest more in the police department, and who want their local school districts to have more money. All of these, there's all these kind of potential local impacts across the state of the tax reform bill. However, legislative leaders, while they acknowledged that there was going to be tweaks to that bill, they seemed very reticent to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. Like, they don't want to make wholesale changes to it, or like, I think it's, or like repeal it, something like that.
Yeah. I am curious to see, so we did a statewide reporting tour where we talked to local communities across the state, and this was the #1 issue that I think people in both political parties mentioned as being a challenge for them. But obviously the intent of the original property tax bill was to help homeowners, or you know, that was the stated attempt with that bill. is it having that effect, Kayla? So is there some, I don't know, positives from it, even if we do hear a lot of complaints about the property tax bill from last year?
Yeah, so basically, I actually just attended a Larry DeBoer presentation about basically what we're projecting that SEA1 will have, what impact it'll have over the next 5 or 6 years. And for the average homestead, let's talk about homeowners. You know, the average I think in the state is like $250,000 or something like that, home price. That homeowner will pay about $300 less on their bill by 2031 than they would have if not for this legislation.
$300 combined less?
Just
like over all
by
those years?
Yeah.
Not like $300 per year.
Correct.
Oh.
Correct.
Okay.
So
I think there might also be a lot of misconceptions about the bill too. You know what I mean? As proven by your question.
Yeah.
this is the analysis that I was looking at on Friday. And then, but you know, the trade-off, the way that that's achieved is essentially what the bill does is it reduces the amount of your assessed value that is taxable. So governments can tax a smaller portion with this new formula of your assessed value. So, and it ends up resulting average across the board about 30% less revenue for local governments from this presentation I was watching Friday. So, you know, those are the trade-offs. And most people end up unhappy with that trade-off because there's people who push for property tax reform that say, like, that doesn't do enough for homeowners. And then, obviously, like you said, local governments are very unhappy with 30% cuts.
I think the issue on property tax reform in general is just you're never going to win no matter what. Like, money has to come from somewhere. So either it's coming from, because local governments have come to rely on this. So either they have to deal with less funding or they need to get money from elsewhere, whether that's raising income taxes or whether the state government gives more money or, you know, having businesses or farmers or major corporations give more in property taxes. So I think it's just hard to come to a winning scenario on that. And I think lawmakers are right that we probably will just see tweaks this year instead of big changes because, how do you find a solution on this issue?
Yeah, and I don't know what tweaks could even do to resolve these very large structural issues that people are complaining about. Like, what would tweaks even do?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point because while legislative leaders did say that there would likely be tweaks, they did not say what the tweaks would be. Like, they didn't, it's not like they ran off a list of potential changes. So they might still be trying to figure out, like, what can we do to make more people happy with this or make more people feel like they can live with this? Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Now, Marissa, you were also at the legislative preview yesterday, and then also just as a team, we've been, speaking with people and just trying to get a feel for what issues might be coming up this legislative session. So I want to ask each of you what topics you expect to see just based on, your conversations. Marissa, I'll start with you. What issues do you think might be the subject of legislation in 2026?
So lawmakers haven't made too many serious commitments about what they will look at this next legislative session. But one topic that did come up yesterday was data centers. Senator Roderick Bray has one kind of in his own backyard in his home county of Morgan County. This massive Google data center that's coming. Residents are not very happy about it. So I could see a world where lawmakers look a little bit at how they can make data centers more transparent, how they can perhaps make it less of a burden when it comes to energy prices for consumers. So that's definitely something to look out for. But across the board, affordability will be a huge issue, and Democrats have made clear that they plan to pressure Republicans on that issue as well.
Yeah, I do. You've done a lot of research and stories on data centers. How prevalent is these data centers in our state now, and what is the big concerns that community members have about these data centers?
Yeah, so data centers have existed for a while, but they've been getting bigger and much more resource hungry in the past few years because of generative AI. So it's just kind of blown up, especially in Indiana the past few years. We've got projects from Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and Google. So it really is all these tech companies coming here. But beyond just, people wondering, what are data centers? Why are they coming near me? They consume huge amounts of energy, and the state of Indiana is really going to have to boost its generation if it wants to serve these energy guzzlers.
Yeah, I do. That also makes me wonder if energy might be a topic this legislative session. It usually is. There's always some energy legislation, but it appears to be a reoccurring subject of conversation in our state. So I am, between the data centers, the LEAP district, I would assume that will be a topic we'll hear about. Hayleigh, what about you? What issues do you think will come up this upcoming session?
I do really think too that the energy question comes back to that affordability question too, where I think the concern from folks is not just that they're using a lot of energy, but that folks residents could be tapped to their utility bills could be higher because, as data centers are maybe putting more costs onto residents, that sort of thing. The same, issue came up in the LEAP district. Essentially, are regular people going to be forced to, be paying for these projects that they didn't necessarily ask for? At the same time, their other prices, prices are going up, healthcare costs are going up, groceries, all of these things that make it just increasingly harder to live. I don't know how much the legislature is going to do about that, but I think it will be a continued issue. Along those same lines, I think lawmakers could decide to try to rein in government spending a little bit more through efforts to consolidate units of government. I've written about township government before, this kind of antiquated, old-timey layer of government that's not responsible for much, but a lot of money is spent on it at this point. The Indiana Chamber, they've talked for a long time about wanting to consolidate school districts that are small. I think will we see huge government reform movement bills around that? I don't know, because it's a short session, but I do expect there to be some movement on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And even if we don't see it this year, down the line, it could come up in longer sessions. Kayla, what about you? What do you expect in 2026 legislative session?
Well, we got a little preview last session about a casino issue when it came up at the tail end of session. Some senators wanted the state to study the idea of maybe a casino coming to Indianapolis. So there was a study that was done, and basically by the State Gaming Commission, and basically suggesting that if there was a new casino in Indiana, the most lucrative spots would be Indianapolis or Fort Wayne, but Indianapolis is number one. So this of course rubs some people the wrong way, like the horse racing tracks in Shelbyville and Anderson. I hope I'm getting those locations right. This would take away, it's competition, so they're worried about their bottom line and having a casino too close to where they are. So I've heard chatter that there's the horse racing group is watching for that this session, and so are we.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that it's coming up, because if you've been around the legislature long enough, this is an issue that has come up in the past and has never succeeded. There's been previous attempts to move a casino to Indianapolis, so I'm very curious if anything will be different this year. One of the things that lawmakers often get in debates over is whether to open up the budget during a short legislative session. It's 2026 is not a budget writing year, so that means we're still relying on the old budget that was passed last year. Any thoughts on if lawmakers might need to open the budget, or if there will be a push to open the budget. Because this isn't something I've heard about as much as I do in other years.
Yesterday they seemed very like the state is not going to be spending more money on, they talked about childcare. That was a big issue that came up yesterday, but the reason why we haven't mentioned it is because there doesn't seem like there's going to be anything done on childcare. It's a big issue for families, obviously, the cost of childcare, but this, legislative leaders feel like they're kind of tapped out in terms of money they can spend based on, revenue forecasts and, everything that you've covered with Medicaid costs rising.
Yeah, I think with the leadership we have, it'd have to be some kind of Uber emergency for them to want to open the budget.
Yeah. Well, have any of you guys been following the child care sort of dilemma about what lawmakers did last session and kind of what the issues are there?
You mean with the vouchers?
Yeah.
Well, that is a thing. They basically the vouchers, or there was federal money that helped the state offer more vouchers to low-income families for childcare, and the state had never matched it with budgetary dollars, and then the federal money runs out, and then suddenly they have to shrink back the childcare voucher program to what it used to be. So that kicked a lot of families off the waiting list for childcare vouchers. So, I'm sure Democrats would try to make that an emergency issue. I just don't think that would be something Republicans would consider an emergency.
Yeah.
It also doesn't seem like a huge priority of this governor as it has been under past governors. Like Governor Pence and Governor Holcomb seemed much more interested in preschool as, as a kind of platform for them, as something they wanted to invest in. This government doesn't seem as interested in that.
You know what we forgot to mention is the IEDC.
I was just about to bring that up. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that, obviously, Braun has made reforming the IEDC one of his major sort of campaign promises and his focuses of his first year. He did a report looking into basically how the IEDC is interwoven with all of these other sort of groups, I guess I would say, and how IEDC is spending money. But it's just a report at this point. Do we think that there are more changes coming to the IEDC, either by the legislator or by Braun in 2026?
I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if legislators will take up the issue, but people certainly want them to. I heard about that a little bit when I visited Boone County, where the LEAP district is a major issue for people. People are very distrustful of the IEDC, and they want to see more done with the audit. They want to see their legislators look further into this issue. So there definitely will be pressure there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I feel like a lot of the distrust with the IEDC started with the LEAP district. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah, like this report, didn't name names really. It was kind of vague. And there are Democrats who are like, let's have a legislative let's compel people to go testify under oath and, make this a more serious thing. I don't know if that'll happen, but I mean, probably at most what we would see this year is ethics rules or new transparency rules for the IEDC, because that was a big focus of the report and also our reporting.
Yeah. Well, I know you all have to get to the Statehouse to prepare for, we have protests today at the Statehouse. To those who want us to redistrict, we'll be at the Statehouse protesting, and then lawmakers convene this afternoon to, again, give speeches and just start the 2026 legislative session. So that's a wrap on our legislative preview for today. Thank you for tuning in, and you can follow up with all of our updates throughout the day at IndyStar.com.